Welcome everyone to the 2021 Art Show and STEAM Expo. This is going to be the fourth of 6 presentations over the course of 2 weeks with our community. So again, we are inviting, excuse me, there we go. We're inviting community leaders and students to present over the course of the last 2 weeks of school to make connections between what our students are doing in their classes and what our community leaders are doing in the field. So we've already heard from some an engineering project manager who works at a company in the US that specializes in complex building. It's actually a detailer, and he puts together the plans from engineers for constructors. 2 nights ago, we heard from Francesco Gallarini. He's an international architect, as well as an ASA alumni 25 years ago, who worked on the Armani Hotel in Dubai, the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building. Last night, we heard from Claudia Rodriguez. She's the director of the Ben Franklin Science Corner here in Paraguay. It's a US Embassy and Paraguayan Scientific Society sponsored STEM Learning Center. And tonight, we're blessed to be honored with the presence of Dr. Fernando Elias. Dr. Fernando Elias is a family practitioner medical doctor who currently works at the US Embassy Health Unit, as well as teaching physiology and community medicine at UNA's School of Medicine. He regularly connects with colleagues at the Medical Bureau in Washington, D.C., and shares his insight with the ASA teaching community. His presentation is going to be followed by 2 student presentations about biology and medical topics. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Elias, and the stage is yours. You'll need to unmute yourself. There we go.
It's a pleasure to be able to share with you this space and especially the topic, because I'm able to go a little bit through what was my experience with being a physician. And okay, so I'm gonna start by saying that I attended med school at the UCA. I heard your introduction. You said UNA. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that in the. But that's my father. He's Hugo Elias. He retired a couple years ago from the UNA. He teach there for the longest time. He's 65 now, and he was in physiology, the physiology subject, the UNA. I am in the UCA med school, and I teach there a couple of different subjects. I am in medical pathology. That's 3rd year. And 1st year, community medicine. And it's a subject that I happen to enjoy a lot. I have an interest in community medicine. And so I'm gonna share a little bit more about that in a minute. So I attended the UCA here in Asunción, in the Santa Librada neighborhood that is like right next to Cateura. Probably many of you know the area. That's right next to the what was the word for vertedero, like the city dumpster, I believe it's the word. So that's a very interesting place to do community medicine, because with our 1st year students, we're able to just walk from the campus, and in minutes we are in that very vulnerable area. And for me, it's very interesting and even fun to talk to med students, because I think this is also part of what's interesting for you as talking about STEM, like the careers that are related to sciences and technology, and medicine in particular. As you might know, it's like it's very competitive. I believe in the past 20 years, it has become a little bit less hierarchical, like the pyramid structure. I'm not finding that word in English, sorry, but that's something very typical from some institutions like medical institutions. So that has diminished a bit, but it's still a very competitive and hierarchy structured career. So that's something you go through and you feel during education, during med school. So there are some hardships, but it's also a career that is very, very satisfying in many different ways. So what I was saying is that you got to think of the profile of the typical med student, right? That is someone that is very oriented towards studying, and usually it's very technical knowledge, right? Like anatomy, histology, all that type of subjects. And then in the middle of all those subjects, you have one that is called community medicine, where we talk about vulnerable communities. We talk about empathy. We talk about resilience. And that's something that many times a med student find a little bit annoying, because that's more like a social sciences profile. And many times a student takes that subject as something secondary because they're more focused on the big subjects. So that's a very interesting interaction, and it's very interesting also to see and to hear the experiences of the students and the background, the cosmovision that we have. You have all the spectrum. When we are there in the vulnerable neighborhoods, from our students there in the UCA are usually, unlike the UNA, the UCA is private, so it's pretty expensive. So our students are, sometimes going through that neighborhood like in the tiptoes, like not touching anything, and a little bit afraid. But after the semester, it's very interesting to see the changes, and we are able to share with. We visit the elders that are not able to go to the health unit, etc. So I just wanted to mention that community medicine is something that I like. I always liked, even when I was in med school. I always had a little bit of that profile, even though I went for medicine. I always enjoyed the community medicine, the medical anthropology subjects, that type.
Looks like we just momentarily lost the connection. For those of you that are joining, we're joined with Dr. Fernando Elias. Oh, you're back. Your connection is back.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Great.
So I don't know where I was disconnected, but I was just mentioning that after I was done with med school, my first residency, in med school, it's 6 or 7 years, depending on what country and depending on the med school, but around 6 or 7 years of education. There's usually 1 year of what we call an internship. And then you're done, you have your diploma of, in Paraguay, it's called a médico cirujano, the license, the diploma, or MD in the States. And so then after that, it's not required, because with that diploma, with that title, you can already practice medicine. But that's like a general diploma. Then you have to do, it's preferable, it's recommended to do a residency, because that's where you get your specialty. So that's where you go that's where you do your training for a specific area, like ophthalmology, dermatology, etc. So when I was done with med school, my first choice was anatomical pathology, because for me it was really important not to do the famous guardias, to be on call. The shifts was something that really stressed me out during the last year, the internship. So I was decided that I wanted to go for a residency that was a little bit more, not as stressful with guardia. So I went for anatomical pathology, that is diagnosing, with microscopes, doing autopsies. And I like the challenge, like a little bit like being a detective, but pretty soon I found out that I was missing, the interaction with living patients instead of instead of corpse. So after 1 year of doing residency in anatomical pathology, I decided to quit. And here, so CONAREM, that's the big, exam like the USMLE in the States that everyone has to go through, no matter from what university you're coming from, UNA, UCA, Uninorte, Universidad del Pacífico. That's the national test, and depending on your ranking, you can pick your specialty. So I was very lucky because I did pretty good in that test. There was only one spot for anatomical pathology. And when you quit, no one else is allowed, you can take that spot. So there is this rule for kids not to do that here in Paraguay, not in other countries. You can quit and try again next year. But here, to try to avoid that, there's a rule that if you, after the exam, if you're not happy with your score, so then you just don't pick any specialty. You just wait another year, you prepare again, and then you do better. So then if you have available, I don't know, you want a plastic surgery and that's still available, like, you ranked 28 and number one goes in front, grabs the mic and says, he sees all the options and he picks, okay, I want dermatology and IPS, or I want pediatrics and Itawa, etc. So it's recommended for you not to pick. If you're not sure, just wait, because otherwise the penalty is that you cannot do the CONAREM again for 3 years. So I quit it, and that's when I decided to go to Spain. I got married that year, went to Spain, and I lived in Spain in a beautiful town north of Barcelona called Girona in Catalonia. And that's where my daughter Sofia was born. So we spent 5 beautiful years there, really near the coast. And then we decided to have more kids. So for family structures and other reasons, we thought, we decided it was time to come back home. It was a hard decision because we were pretty well there and happy. So we almost stayed in Spain, but at the end we decided to come back. During my residency also, there was a couple of months that because I did family medicine. I didn't mention that. I quitted anatomical pathology. I missed being with the patient, the face-to-face interaction. So I chose family practice. That was my residency in Spain. In family medicine, we rotate because it's a transversal specialty. It's a general, specialty, family practitioners. So we rotate through cardiology, nephrology. So it's a wide range of specialty. And there was one rotation called external rotation where you could pick, go abroad. Like you could justify, like my a classmate that he went to Holland because there is a hospital specialized in liver disease. So that was his justification. He was allowed to keep his salary and go to Holland for a couple of months. And I decided that I wanted to go to the States to visit the family that hosted me in the year 2000, many years ago. 21.
Looks like our connection just cut out a little bit. It looks like
I'm
your
sorry.
connection just cut out. You just talked about the family you went to visit in 2000, about 20 years ago.
Yeah, so I managed to justify before the board in Spain that I needed to go to Higginsville, a little town in Missouri, 45 minutes away from Kansas City, to see how family medicine is practiced in the States, and what better place than in a semi-rural. Because at the beginning it was like, why do you want to go to like a small town in the Midwest? And I was like, well, English, and I can compare how family medicine is practiced in the States, that is a different system, and in Spain, that is a social system. So that was, very interesting. And I got to be with Dr. Pulliam, who I already met, back in the day when I was an AFSer. I have some funny stories. I don't think I have enough time to talk about that, but just real quick, till this day, I have some old classmates from Higginsville that when I go visit, they see me and they say, Nando. And the reason for that is that when I was rotating with Dr. Polian, he's a family practitioner, so he would go, there was a hospital in Warrensburg, like 30 minutes away. So he invited me to go with him because he would also practice labors. So there was going to be a birth. I went with him. That was a very fantastic experience. And it turns out that the lady that was going into labor was an old classmate from when I was in Higginsville the year 2000. I didn't see her for 2 years. So that was just very funny that, seeing her in that position, like us going in for the labor, and I didn't recognize her at first because she's there for the labor, and she said Nando, and I was like, Brianna. So that was just a funny story in Higginsville, and that the friends from there always remember. That's kind of like an internal joke that remained. So anyways, that was very interesting, and I was able to learn a lot, to compare. And then when I came, and one last thing is that in Spain, family medicine is also, the title is Medicina Familiar y de la Comunidad. So it's, family and community medicine. So when I came back, I started doing emergency medicine. I started to teach in the UCA. That was my med school. I went into the community medicine, so I was happy to be able to do that. And even today, in present day, I go like every 3 months to Chaco. There is a couple of hours to the east and north from Philadelphia. There is a native settlement called Chailí, and that it's very interesting because they are the very last tribe that was living in the wilderness, like not contact with civilization, and that they are just in the last 10 years coming into contact. And that's, for me, very interesting because where just everything crosses, where I go for like health workshops, nutrition workshops, and so I'm able to see a community that's coming out of the that is just contacting in the last 10 years with Western civilization, Western diet. So I get to see the impact on their like diabetes, hypertension, and so I can compare the population in Asunción and also in Chaco. And I also started working in the American Embassy in the last 2 years, and that was for me a blessing because honestly, ever since I came back from Paraguay, this is already, I went to Spain in 2011 and came back in 2010 and came back in 2015. And I'm not very happy, I'm not very satisfied with the way that family medicine is articulado. I don't know if that's also said articulated, how it's mounted well, it's just, it's far from optimal. So I do family medicine, and here in this office, I do emphasis in diabetes. So that's my main scope, family medicine. I do mainly in the embassy. And I was going to say that there, it is a lot more similar to what I was trained to do in Spain. Unfortunately, in Asunción, a family practitioner, a family practitioner is a transversal, like I said in the beginning, where you're, you are very, we say in Spanish, resolutivo, right? You can resolve 80% of, and you only refer the patients that actually need the service of the cardiologist, the nephrologist. And here in Asunción, for me, it's very hard to practice and an ideal family medicine. But in the embassy, I am our community from the embassy. There, I am allowed to not only do like internal medicine, like most family practitioners do in Asunción, but condylitis. It's a tennis player elbow. So, that wide range of activities that a family practitioner is trained to do, I'm able to practice at the embassy. So I'm very happy there with the team. So yeah, so that's my road, my hoja de ruta from university, going through the residency, and coming back to Paraguay, and now working in the embassy. And just one last mention, it's already 7:21, so you said 15 minutes. I'm already 5 minutes past my time, so I apologize. But I just wanted to finish by saying that, I want to take advantage of the topic of diabetes that I also practice, because it's such a big issue, and it's such a big problem for public health, because that's also a pandemic. The diabetes, it's a diagnosis that it's increasing very fast globally. More noticeable is more markedly, I'm translating literally, I don't know if that makes sense, in third world country, that's true. But even in first, globally, diabetes, it's rising in a concerning pace. So for me, it's very interesting to practice diabetology, because it's an area where we need to spend a lot of time with the patient doing education. Unlike other specialties like surgery, where you go in and you take care of business pretty fast and you're done. In diabetes specifically, it's unique because you need to train the patient not only for them to take their medication, but lifestyle intervention. We know that the way we eat, our eating habits, our physical activities are very important. So just how do you call it, the interactions between diabetes and community medicine. So I have this scope of my medical practice. And pandemic, I can't finish without saying a couple of words about the pandemic. The pandemic in as you know, in Paraguay has been really hard at the beginning. It was looking good, but then, pretty soon, when our, public health system collapsed, well, you see the current situation. That is, unfortunately, it's sad, with even the private sector with more than 90% of their capabilities occupied. So, we hope this improves, but it just shows how far we still are as, a community, and as a, as social, as a, our public health system is very precario. Fortunately, at the embassy, we right now have 0 active COVID cases. So we are very happy for that. Our community is already, more than 80% vaccinated. So I think that's about it. Oh, and I wanted to finish with I talk at the beginning about empathy and resilience, and that's something that I'm used also to talk about in the community medicine classes, but now more than usual with the pandemic, those are concepts that are very important. Empathy, to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person, and resilience with the pandemic and all the and all the adverse situations that we're going through. The kids in school, I know it's been hard for everyone, but I believe especially more so for some some parts of the community, like kids and teenagers, just because that's such important phase, time of our life where interactions and peers are so important. So resilience and empathy was 2 words that I thought I wanted to don't have much time to go in too deep. But Viktor Frankl is an author. He was an Austrian psychiatrist that came up with logotherapy. And logotherapy, I thought, when I rotated my mental health rotation in my residency, I really enjoyed. And logotherapy, I thought, was very interesting because unlike psychoanalysis, that is Freud, that was also an Austrian, they were both from Vienna, and Freud was psychoanalysis. Or pain, like other schools of thought, but in purpose. So I don't know if I can share.
You should be able to if you want to.
Let me see. Just to finish, wanted to share this.
I want to thank you so much for this chat. It's really insightful to see the story of a medical doctor and to know that it's maybe not always, a linear path. Like the story that you tell is one of a doctor learning from your own curiosities as well as your own, maybe possibly challenges, and then taking risks and benefiting from these risks.
That's right. That's right. So I don't know if you see the image of Viktor Frankl there on screen.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, it says, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. That's a good message.
That gains more meaning when you know the story of Viktor Frankl, because he was in a concentration camp, so he suffered a lot. He survived. So he was very empathic, and he came with logotherapy. So I think that's unique and very unique from someone that went through such hard times. And he said something that I liked a lot. That is that liberty, our liberty should always be accompanied by responsibility, because our freedoms are framed where the freedom of the next person begins. So that's something that I also I saw in the internet that because he said one time when he visited the States in a conference in some university in the States, he said that the role of the United States as a world leading country and culture, it's very important, but that responsibility and liberty are two sides of the same coin. So he proposed that there should be a statue of responsibility in front of the West Coast, like the Statue of Liberty in New York. So I thought that was neat. I think I saw one time on the internet that I think there is a foundation and even a prototype like what the statue would look like, but I don't know if they're pursuing that. But I just wanted to share Viktor Frankl. And okay, so it's already 7:30. So I'm sorry for taking so much more of the time I was supposed to. Thanks again for letting me participate and for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
I think you've actually already answered one of my questions. It was going to be if you could say any words of inspiration or any guidance to students that want to follow a medical career. And I think you've already given us a lot of the messages. You have to learn from your challenges, and you have to expand your horizons and try opportunities in other countries, not just the Paraguayan system, but the Spanish system and the US system. But if you maybe had just a couple words of advice, like summaries for our presenters, Valentina and Jimena, and anybody else listening in, what would you say to a high schooler that's curious about studying medicine, that's curious about studying anatomy and physiology, and that is curious about taking, an advanced placement college course in biology or chemistry?
Well, I would say that it's a very, it's a beautiful career, because it gives you lots of satisfaction, to treat patients, to help people. It's it's rewarding in a way that it's many times hard to describe, that goes beyond what many times, most of the times is mentioned, related to the career of medicine, like prestige. We cannot not mention the financial part, although that's something med students always say, to help people, right? But financially also, medicine, it's I would say a decent career in Paraguay. In the States, it's even better, because most physicians, they, what's the word for salarios? The salary are very interesting all across the board. Here in Paraguay, it varies a lot. Varies. Never remember how to pronounce that word, but depending if you have like a general specialties, not so much. More, some specialties like interventionists, like cardiosurgeons, plastic surgery, etc. Those are, they make better income. But leaving aside the financial part and the prestige, is a very.
I guess while the connection's a little bad, Valentina, if when he finishes, if you have a question for him, this would be a great time to ask once it's done. Great. Valentina, do you have a question you'd like to ask Dr. Elias?
Yes. So my question is, has the pandemic reinforced or changed your reasons for practicing medicine?
Sorry, if the pandemic changed, I'm sorry.
Yes, if it either changed or if it reinforced your reasons for practicing medicine.
I would say it reinforced. The pandemic for me was bittersweet. Of course, bitter because of, we don't have to mention all the consequences for the economy and for health, and so many people that we know that with lost relatives. But on the other hand, I was also able to have some more time to share with my family, and to connect again with things that I left behind, some literature, some reading, some writing, some projects for the Ayoreos Totobiosodes in Chaco for community medicine in school. So for me, it was, it also had a bright side, and so I would say it reinforced.
Before we move on to your presentation, Valentina, Jimena, do you have any general questions for Dr. Elias, just about being a medical doctor or the path to become a doctor?
In general terms, I currently do not have any questions.
Okay, then we will go to Valentina's presentation. You can go ahead, Valentina, and screen share and walk us through what your biological and medical study was.
Okay. So my presentation discusses the process of cancer cells dividing compared to the division of regular cells. And I was really interested when we learned about this topic in biology class, so I'm really excited to share my Google Slides. So in this visual, we can see a comparison between normal cell division versus cancer cell division. And the first thing we can notice when we start analyzing both visuals is that there are two different symbols, the circles and the stars. The circles are a representation of the normal cells, the healthy ones, versus the stars, which are a representation of the damaged and the cancer cells. So when we start analyzing normal cell division, which is a visual in the left, we can see that the damaged cell, when it is encountered, apoptosis, which is cell death, will take place, where the cell that is damaged will be replaced and killed. So then the process of reproduction will keep on moving healthily. On the other hand, we can see that in cancer cell division, the only symbol that is drawn are the stars, which are the cancerous and damaged cells. So therefore, this means that during cancer cell division, the only cells that are being reproduced are the cancerous and the damaged ones. And this will then later on lead to a tumor and cancer. So the first topic of discussion will be cell reproduction. In the previous slide, I already talked about how in cancer cell division, the process fails when the damaged cell is not killed. So the cancer cell will then begin to multiply rapidly since they have control over their growth signals. And then at the last, all the damaged cells collected together will cause a tumor. But on the other hand, in normal cell division, all cells will divide normally until the damaged cells once again encountered. But when this happens, as I discussed before, apoptosis will take place and the damaged cell will be killed and the division will no longer be disrupted. So the new cells will replace the dead ones that became damaged in order to maintain the cell population growing in a healthy rate. So we're taking a further observation at cell death, which is apoptosis. And the main difference that I decided to share is that in normal cells, they have the ability of self-destruction when they're diseased. And this happens through the process of apoptosis, where the cells manage to break down and they're eliminated by the white blood cells. But with the cancer cells, they don't count of the ability to self-destruct, and this is because of the mutations that let the damage in the cells go unrevealed in the first place. So to sum it up, the main similarity between these two processes is that they both revolve around the division of cells, and they also both encounter damaged cells at one point. But the main difference between them is that during normal cell division, the damaged cell is dealt with in time and killed. But during cancer cell division, the damaged cell isn't killed, so then the cancer cells will start reproducing. And the cancer cells, unlike the normal cells, they do not cease reproduction when they come into touch with other cells, which is known as contact inhibition, but they will continue to reproduce and reproduce instead. And this is why, as a result, they will pile up on top of one another and a tumor will be produced. And thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Valentina. What were some of the questions that you walked away with after this study? Like, what were some of the new wonderings or curiosities that you had about cancer cells after learning about this?
After learning about this, I found myself really interested in doing more research about apoptosis. And I really wanted to know, I'm still with the question. I plan on learning more about it in these vacations, but I wanted to know, why does apoptosis fail in the first place? And why does that lead to more and more damaged cells reproducing? Because there needs to be a problem for apoptosis to fail and lead to the cancerous cells reproducing more and more.
Can I jump in now?
Please,
Yes.
please.
Okay. Yeah, well, apoptosis, that's a very interesting, topic. It is like you mentioned, like a programmed death of the cell. And what happens many times, and this is, a lot of this is still hypothesis, because many of what happens in like very small, molecular levels in this area are still unknown. But when the normal tissue and the cells have a, they go through a, how to explain, in the cell, the nucleus has all the information of the genome, of the genes and of the function of the cell, everything. And so they command and they govern the cytoplasma, where they produce their proteins and they do all their, all their functions. And so when a cell, stops doing its normal function, there are, like you mentioned, there are some messengers that are supposed to give the sign that something is not working well. So then they program the death of that cell to recover the normal cell or the normal function. But many times, for unknown reasons, when the cell starts to reproduce without order, and they change the shape of their of the tissue that they are where they are and that they're supposed to carry out. So then also the messengers that are supposed to detect the problem are not able to to solve the situation or to make it stop or to trigger the apoptosis. So then these cells keep reproducing, and that's where we have first we have the hyperplasia. That is when it starts differentiating, and when that keeps going, then it becomes more and more different from the original tissue. So first you have hyperplasia, and then dysplasia, and then you have the neoplasia. That's when it's already when it's a cancer. Then you have the benigns and the malignant ones that are that can also spread either through por contiguidad, we say, through the tissues that are next, or through the hematogenous via, through the blood. They can go far away, and that's what's called metastases. And many times in some cancers, some neoplastic growth, the etiology or the cause is better known. For example, the esophagus cancer that is related to tobacco or to different irritants to the esophagus. Like in Uruguay and Paraguay, there's a little bit of also esophagus cancer because of drinking very hot mate. So initially that produces like an esophago de Barrett, which means that the normal tissue starts changing into and so that's why the controls are important to detect soon when they start changing before they become something more serious. So what I was saying is that in some cases the causes are better known, like exposure to certain substances or medications or radiation, etc. But many times, unfortunately, in medicine, there's still a lot of things to resolve or to cover.
Thank you, Dr. Elias.
So at this point, I think we'll move on to our next presentation. I hope, Valentina, that gave you a little more inspiration on further things to study, further curiosities about this, and even some specific cases. The new one about mate and the case of the challenge in the throat is entirely new to me. Our next presentation is going to be from Jimena, and it's about neurotoxins. So we're going to watch a video first, and then afterwards, Jimena will kind of walk us through a little bit about this. So Jimena loves researching snakes and neurotoxins, and she ended up submitting one of these to the STEAM Expo. So when the STEAM Expo is live on Monday, you'll be able to see this presentation. We're just going to watch the video. It's about 2 minutes long, and then Jimena, you can kind of follow up with some other thoughts on it. So here we go.
This is a neuron cell. You've probably seen this multiple times before, but in case you haven't, a neuron cell is a cell found in a human body responsible for transferring messages from the brain throughout the body, such as commands for actions or words, like the ones I'm speaking right now. Now, let's move on and talk about what we will be talking today, the neurotoxin. The neurotoxin is one of the most important and dangerous types of toxins known to mankind. Just like the hemotoxin, it is one of the main types of toxins found in snakes, known for extreme specificity and speed. Now, as we zoom into the neuron cells' dendrites, you can find a cholinergic enzyme called the acetylcholinesterase, or ACHE for short. And that is what the neuron toxin does, is to tear down the acetylcholinesterase, so it cannot stop the toxin as it finds its way to attack the cholinergic neurons, in simpler words, a neurotransmitter that causes the involuntary motion of muscles. This is called tearing, and as the body loses control of itself, one can stop breathing, amongst other things. Thanks to its extreme precision, some scientists study neurotoxins to find ways to apply this target system into finding more cures for diseases such as cancer and can possibly stop more future diseases with much more ease. Since this project was about snake toxins, it would seem reasonable to say that this process is similar on multiple other neurotoxic beings or objects, but not exactly the same as the snake injects its toxins, unlike some fungus which is most likely to transfer the neurotoxins through touch. Along with that, some snakes that possess neurotoxins are the famed black mamba, the many-banded crate, the Mojave rattlesnake, the yellow-bellied sea snake, the Samar cobra, and some species even found in Paraguay, such as the tropical rattlesnake and the South American bushmaster. Thank you so much for watching my project. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great day.
I think a really interesting thing here is that we're talking about a couple similar things, like you brought up cancer cells in this, as well as the neurotoxins. Jimena, can you walk us through where's your passion? Where have you always been interested in this, or is this a recent curiosity that you've been getting into? Why neurotoxins?
Funny story, really. When I was younger, I always had a passion to snakes, despite my parents not liking towards that. Especially my mother going on about snakes being a sign of evil and bad stuff, but I did not care. Recently, my father suggested to look into quantum physics to find out the definition and study more about how it works, that type of stuff. So after research, I wondered, what if you applied this knowledge of the quantum realm and quantum dimension to cure things such as cancer, which cause a lot of problems and a lot of people's lives to go harder. And I went into the neurotoxin, despite they're obviously not approved since it was specifically about snakes. And I went on to study about how the specificity that it uses to target just those sections of the neuron cell can be also used to do stuff such as nanotech, which can be used to also target specific cells inside and cure things much easier. And
Mrs. Barnett, you're going to have Jimena in a couple of years as a biology teacher. What kind of interests you about this? What kind of curiosities or wondering do you walk away with?
Yeah, I was gonna ask Hime what grade she's in, just so I could know when she'll be in my class.
She's seventh grade.
I got into science because I was interested in environmental science and nature. So I was looking at it from that point of view, like the compounds out in nature, different species, how we all interact with each other, that kind of a thing. And my two daughters also say hi. They've been listening. And Dr. Elias and Valen and Hime, we have all been listening and we're all very excited.
I was a little surprised about just the different types of neurotoxins when you talked to Jimena about both fungus neurotoxins and snake neurotoxins. So this is a pretty big subject. I don't know, Dr. Elias, do you want to weigh in a little bit, maybe give Jimena some advice, some things that she could explore, maybe some more clarifications or some questions that she can, take out on her own and keep her journey going as a budding medical practitioner?
Well, it's very, very interesting. Snakes is it's something that it's very related as well to research into the medical field. In the UCA, they used to, I don't know if they still have a
Looks like we just paused for a second.
Some research. I had a classmate that was very interested in snakes and would develop the suero antiofídico, to counteract when you have a snake bite. And also he would,
Looks like we're
I forgot to rate it. So the scar looks yeah, big. So they were experimenting with that as well in the university, and you know, neurotoxins in relation with cancer is also interesting because that's true. Not only the, you know, the destructive part of the neurotoxins, but you know, there are also they are used to specifically target, you know, the components of the of the nervous system, you know, for study, you know, like ethanol, drinking alcohol, nitric oxide, the toxin of the botulismo, the botulinic toxin as well from the Botox, that is also used in small amounts to inject into the muscles to, you know, so it, you know, gets rid of the wrinkles. So, you know, that's a very wide area, very interesting. I hope you pursue and you keep your interest in neurotoxins.
Jimena, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask about your project? Maybe some curiosities that you have about it, or areas that you want to keep studying?
I actually have a question regarding more of the nervous system over neurotoxins, but is there a close estimate to about how fast can neurons actually transmit signals from the brain to the body and spread throughout?
That would, you know, that would depend on the type of nerve, because some have what's called a vaina de mielina, mielina sheath. I don't know how you call it, like a cover. And that's something that always blew my mind because those are able to transmit the signal, the electrical signal, way faster than the other nerves that do not have the mielina. It's like a, you know, I don't know the word for vainas, you know. So it's like you imagine you know, a cable that has a cover, but with jumps. You know, it doesn't cover the whole cable, but it has like little bridges where it's exposed. So actually, the signal jumps through the gaps. It doesn't go, so it's, you know, so the signal is it's able to go from the brain to the hand, for example, when you're playing the piano in matter of milliseconds. And in the ones that don't have the vaina de mielina, so then it's slower, 3 meters per second. I should check the physiology book. I don't remember the exact numbers of, you know, meters per second, but it depends on the type of nerve. And these ones that I'm talking about, the ones that have the mielin, the vaina de mielina, those are the ones that go to the muscles that are with will, that you manage it with voluntarios, and that's the mielina that is consumed in some diseases like sclerosis, and that's why those patients start losing the ability to move those muscles, and it could be pretty severe when it affects the diaphragma because the patient can't breathe.
So
it's called a myelin sheath, I think.
Sheath. Okay, myelin.
Yes, myelin sheath.
it almost makes me wonder that data transfer,
mielina,
like fiber optics versus traditional, you know, phone cable for transferring data.
Yeah.
I know we're really late on time, but I had something I wanted to mention to Dr. Elias really quick. I used to teach on a Native American reservation in the Southwest United States, and the
nice.
Indian Health Service out there has done research, multidisciplinary research, and they've correlated the opening of fast food restaurants and the rates of diabetes in Native Americans. And it reminded me of your work with the group in the Chaco, and maybe there's some interesting research correlations that can go along with it. And it's obviously crystal clear when the McDonald's opened and when the Wendy's opened in various communities, and when the health service started registering increased rates of diabetes in those populations.
That's very interesting, and that's right. To add on top of that, the native populations are already considered to have higher risk than Latins, and Latins more higher risk than Caucasians. But what for me it's very interesting is that when I would measure the blood sugar of many of the ayoreos that just came out of the wilderness, I don't know if that's, I'm sorry if I'm using words that are not, proper.
We all understand, yeah.
But I was surprised of how low the readings were. So, and you can also find in the literature that hypothesis that, speaking of genetics, you also have this epigenetic factor that, many of us that are already used to our diet and are already our parents, we are, better prepared than someone that is not used to that. So their readings are for me, were really low. So then the hypothesis is that they are probably having diabetes. So like we consider diabetes above 126 milligrams per deciliter, but that's a conventional number because of the stats and all the clinical trials and that it's done with, Europe and the States, but probably for native, the threshold should be lower. So it's probably more diabetes than it's under-registered. I don't know if that's
yeah, clear. That totally makes sense. So I had Valen in class this year, and I guess I'll have Hime sometime soon. And this year we didn't quite get to everything because of our hybrid schedule. We just didn't have as many classes as we would have. But if we had a few more weeks, we would have looked at research and data about lactose intolerance also. Is there any research or data about Paraguayan different populations and rates of lactose intolerance correlated with like European ancestry versus native or indigenous ancestry? Because the teaching materials I have show that lactose tolerance is a mutation that has evolved with populations that were agricultural and pastoral in Northern Africa and then moved into Europe. And so people of European ancestry can drink milk and eat dairy products, no problem. But then a lot of people with Native American ancestry are lactose intolerant. And these are materials from the US. But have you heard of anything like that here around South America?
No, not that I know of. That's very interesting. Here locally, unfortunately, there isn't a lot of research in lactose intolerance or gluten, and like food intolerances in general. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of data, and even less those comparisons between. But that would be very interesting to look into. If statistically there are differences between those subgroups of the population. It makes total sense.
So unless we don't have any other questions, Dr. Elias, we really appreciate your time. We've taken far more than we originally agreed upon, and we really appreciate it. And so we want to thank you again. Valentina and Jimena, we want to thank you so much for your presentations. They were absolutely fantastic, and I hope you walk away with some new curiosities and wonderings. Again, we've been joined by Dr. Fernando Elias this evening. We're going to take a break tomorrow night and Saturday and Sunday. On Monday, we're going to be back with learning about ASU MASP and Sistema B, Community Development and Innovation, specifically in the Barrio Santísima Trinidad with their Escala Barrio project. This is going to be connected with 7th graders who have been doing a community innovation project. And then on Tuesday, we're going to hear from Dr. Jorge Curita. He's the engineering director of the Paraguayan Space Agency. and he's going to talk to us about the story behind the Guarani 1 satellite. I want to thank everyone again so much. Have a fantastic evening, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you, Dr. Elias. All the best and have a fantastic.
Thanks for having me, and good job, Valentina and Jime.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.